this morning will center around how to manage population explosion, of course, which is not peculiar to Nigeria. It's a global discussion. So let me quickly introduce the Honorable Minister of Health, who has joined us again here in the studio live, Dr. Sage Hanire. Thank you very much for joining us. And also we have here with us Dr. Ejike Oji, who is the Chairman, Technical Management Committee, Association for the Advancement of Family Planning. He's also Chairman, Local Organizing Committee of the 6th Nigeria Family Planning Conference. Dr. Oji, good to have you with us again.
Thank you for having me this morning.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is Ula Elizabeth Mula. She's the resident representative in Nigeria of the United Nations Population Fund. That's UNFPA. A pleasure to have you with us on the program this morning.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. And joining us via Zoom from Akwanga in nearby Nasarawa State, I would like to welcome Arizechi Unduka Alfonso, who is the Acting Director and Head of the Population Management Department of the National Population Commission, NPC. Mr. Alfonso, a pleasure to have you with us this morning.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, the issues ordinarily are clear, but they are, of course, much deeper than the topic would indicate, which are options in population management in Nigeria. And happily, we've had Dr. Ejike Oji join us from time to time in recent years to discuss issues around population management in Nigeria. But let's begin with the Honorable Minister of Health. From a sociological and even medical point of view, why should any entity, in this case a country, be concerned about managing its population?
It is clear that you aspire to manage your population to fit your economic situation. If you are able to align population growth with economic growth and take care of your citizens properly, then you have actually started understanding the target. The growth of an economy, which all countries aspire to, should not be outstripped by the growth of the population. Otherwise, there's a decline in prosperity. So it is a matter of responsibility that population growth properly aligns with economic growth, and that you have citizens that are healthy, well-fed, well-educated, and well-positioned to contribute their own quota to the country.
In terms of aligning, just as you said, with economic growth, how do you evaluate our population vis-a-vis economic growth?
Well, right now, that is not very well aligned. Economic growth is lagging slightly behind, somewhat behind population growth. And there are sociologists and those who study society and behavior who think that that is part of what is responsible for the restiveness of the youth at the moment, in that there is a large number of the addition to population annually, and the opportunities are not forthcoming in the same proportion. You don't have enough jobs, enough schools, enough positions for the population as they are coming along. So that creates a certain tension. And if you follow the opinion of those who look at this subject in a broad way, they will say that there is a connectivity between the restiveness and the opportunities available.
All right, Dr. Yohanide, thank you very much. Let's bring in Dr. Ejike Oji now to also pitch in with regard to the nexus involving population size, prosperity, and ultimately family planning. Usually, there are rates that we take a look at. That's fertility rate and population growth rate. What is it that we are dealing with now, and how are we close to overcoming some of our current challenges?
Yes, thank you, Kingsley. When we talk about how do we measure our population and then the way it grows, Nigeria, based on National Population Commission's estimates, coming from the 2006 census, where we were counted to be 140 million, they posited there were about 221 million as we speak. And our total fertility rate is about 5.3. So, and then if you also look at our modern methods contraceptive prevalence rates is about 12%, but that was NDHS 2018, so it might be a lot better now because 2 years have passed. So when you look at that, you see that we have a very big population with a very high fertility rates, and the number of women taking contraceptive measures to manage or plan their families are very small. So what has now happened is we have some demographers who say that we're almost in a demographic crisis. So in other words, what do you see to make you believe that we are in that kind of crisis is, first of all, you have the youthful bulge. 70% of our population is under the age of 30. In fact, 45% of the population is actually under the age of 15. And then if you look at the elderly, just about 3.5% of our population is above the age of 65. So when you look at the dependency ratio of the population, about 86.5% of our population is dependent on the other 12-point-something%. So that shows you a high youthful bulge. Then the second one is when you have a lot of young people, even people that are a little older, live in the country. You see a lot of very well-educated young people trained by Nigerian money, live in the country every day, especially young medical doctors. They are immigrating to Canada as we speak. Not only that, when you see also non-highly educated people live in the country. Some estimates show that 14% of all the people that cross the tempestuous sea of the Mediterranean, I like to underline that to show you how desperate these people are to cross over to Europe. They're Nigerians. Some months ago, 44 migrants were attacked and killed in Libya. 9 of them were Nigerians. When this administration came, they didn't like how Nigerians were being treated in Libya. There was a plane load of Nigerians coming back. That will show you young people trying to leave. Then the last one is when you see issues of nationals killing nationals. You remember that OPC started years ago, about 2004-05 or so, followed by militancy in the Niger Delta. And then you had kidnapping and Bakassi boys in the southeast, followed by the religious crisis on the plateau, and then Boko Haram in the northeast, then banditry in the northwest. Now you have herders farmers clash all over the places. And this is happening in a situation where the physical size of Nigeria is actually shrinking, so to speak. Every year, the Sahara Desert is encroaching at the rate of 3 to 4 meters every year. The Lake Chad that has about 4 million hectares of arable land. Some estimates show that it's shrunken by almost 95% of its original size 50 years ago. So you can see, and our economy is actually mono economy. It's just that this administration is trying to diversify. What is a mono economy focused only on oil? When oil prices drop, that means the quantum of money we have to use to take care of our citizens have also dropped. So these are some of this. In fact, when I look at my honorable minister occasionally, I wonder how he manages. Let me give you a simple example to show how there this is. In 2016, the capital budget for the Federal Ministry of Health, in terms of Naira value, was way, way above the Naira value in 2007. But you look at the dollar-denominated value, is actually about 70% of what the Federal Ministry of Health got as capital vote in 2007. So per capita, it's reduced funding to individual Nigerians for the healthcare needs of this country. So these are some of the pictures I like to bring to the fore to see that it is not easy.
All right, Dr. Jike, thank you. Let me bring Ola now. Ola, the minister talked about the need for population to be properly aligned with the economic growth, which is quite logical. But conversely, some countries also deploy population demography as an economic tool within the context of, markets and human resources. Basically, in talking about population management, what are the specific conversations?
I think the minister alluded to it quite accurately, actually, because the specific conversations is, of course, how you can sustain both economic and social growth. So one of the concepts under the African Union is the demographic dividend, which is really how you reap that benefit that comes from having a well-educated, productive group on the labor market who are able to also then take care of the people, of the elderly people or people who need health care or for some reason are not economically active. So the discussions we have around that is, of course, education. How is the education system working, but also how is family planning and demographics playing into that? So the investments you make into those areas is all about ensuring that you develop job opportunities for young people, but also that young people who are our future, and we just heard how many young people there are in Nigeria, actually have the opportunity to make their own decisions about what are their family aspirations. How would they like their family to look like? And in that, of course, also how many children do they want? So it's about making informed decisions about your lives. It's about creating job opportunities. But it's also about enabling governments to see how is the investment we have to do in healthcare. If the population looks like this, how much money do we need to send towards education? How much do we need to send towards healthcare? Care for the elderly? And you cannot do that if you don't understand and manage your growth. Because you need to know, when we talk about education, you need to know 10 years from now, how much money do we need in the education system? So these are the conversations we have. We also have the conversations around women on the labor market. And that is one of the things we often forget when we talk about demographics. In a country like Nigeria, we need to also ensure that every citizen in the country contributes. And when women do not have the opportunity to also make their own choices, they very often do not end up on the labor market, or they don't finish their education. And that means that they're not contributing. So the government and the country and the communities are actually not getting the return on the investment that initially starts with a girl child when she goes to school. But she has to finish her education, and then she can give back. So it's about how we ensure that everyone in society can give back and contribute to a healthy economic development in the country. And women and girls play a critical role in that too.
All right. Thank you very much, Ola Mula. We'll return to you in the course of the conversation. Now, let's join Alfonso, whom we earlier introduced via Zoom. You can see him there on the right side of your screen. He's Acting Director, Head Population Management Department of the National Population Commission. Mr. Alfonso, now give us an idea of what the numbers are like now, because we keep hearing about projections since the last national population census we had was in 2006, and there's no indication that when we're going to have the next exercise. So what are the numbers looking like in terms of absolute numbers, in terms of also disaggregation, youth, elderly, and so on and so forth, and where are the pressures coming from?
Yeah, thank you very much. We took our last census in 2006, to be precise, and this is 2020. And by global standard, we're supposed to take our censuses decennially, that's every 10 years. And any figure that is outside that 10 years is not reliable, it's probably obsolete. And that is why we are crying for, we're struggling to have our next census. And I'm happy that government is responding. So we're in full progress to make our conduct our next census very soon.
It looks like there is a freeze. Alfonso, I asked the other leg of my question, namely, what are the numbers now? You've only responded to when we might have a census. No date, of course, has been fixed, and I doubt if there is any line item for that in the 2021 appropriation. of the federal government. I'm saying, what are our numbers now? What is the projection? We keep hearing we are 200 million, 210, X, Y, Z. How many young persons do we have? How many elderly persons do we have? And what are the projections for the growth or decline of these subgroups and sub-numbers?
Just like I said earlier, the projections are not reliable. So that's why we're working hard towards conducting the next census. Right now, we're doing our enumeration area demarcation, which will give the country frame to conduct reliable census. And our hands are on deck. Very soon, we'll be in a field to make progress and to proceed to get into that, come over that one before we conduct our census. And all our census documents are being, worked on. We are more or less getting ready for the proclamation for the census. Any figure we'll give you now will be unreliable because outside the reliable figure outside the frame that can be relied on.
Thank you very much, Mr. Alfonso. But I do recall that a couple of years ago, the then chairman of your commission was in New York, and he was widely quoted as saying at the time that Nigeria's population was 198 million. I don't know where the 2 million or 5 or 6 addition has come in now that we're now saying we are 200 and something. So perhaps we might stick with that and say we remain 198 million until you conduct a reliable census exercise. Thank you very much. We hope to return to you in the course of the conversation. Let's bring in again the Honourable Minister of Health.
Yes, so please, Honourable Minister, I'd just like for us to look at our policies so far in terms of have we been deliberate with our policies towards, addressing population growth? Have we been specific with our policies? Are they targeted? Have they been targeted?
Well, yes, it is. From the conversations you've had so far, the clips that you played before we started, you can see that the issue of population is a fairly delicate issue, and delicate because there are those who believe that it's something that God gives you. Others look at it that if you must be able to manage the number of children you have. You shouldn't have children in excess of what you should have. So the questions around population, particularly the number of children that you should have, is fairly delicate. And government definitely relies on the fact that there's going to be birth control. There's going to be that every family should have a number of children that they can manage, and not have children in excess of what their economic situation actually should permit.
I was just wondering, Honourable Minister, I mean, for as long as one can remember, the delicate nature of discussing population issues in the country has always been on the table. So, are we thinking of how we can surmount those challenges or begin to address those challenges? Because they center around culture, center around religion, and politics, resource allocation, and all of that. And as we continue to say, well, look, this is a delicate piece of China, don't break it so that I don't create some confusion. We are seeing the consequences such as you have highlighted, such as Dr. Ejike has highlighted, and such as we see daily in the reports in the news media as to what population pressure is doing for us. Earlier you were talking about the connection between population and prosperity. What economists recommend is that our GDP annual growth rate must outstrip our population growth rate. The population growth is about 3.2, I believe, the last time we got the numbers. But we have not been able to achieve 3.2. In fact, we are in a technical recession right now. So when are we therefore going to place these issues on the front burner and take it away from the comfort of our private homes, and then let everybody begin to see the consequences of what we have faced with, and therefore how to begin to deal with it without necessarily offending our sensibilities?
You're correct. I think there is an awakening that is coming up, and that awakening actually started several years ago. But it hasn't reached everywhere. And because it hasn't reached everywhere, there are decision makers, community leaders who do not see it as logically and as rationally as economists see it. And the nature of living in society is that you must take the opinion and consideration of all persons into view. And so you can, even if you don't agree with this particular class of reasoning, you still have to take it into consideration in whatever you are doing for the sake of social stability and political stability. But there's an awakening, and the awakening is such that everybody is seeing now what it means to have a large number of youths who have no jobs, who have no very poor education or no education, and who do not see a future, and who more or less are on their own, are uncatered for. So the question now is beginning to arise, okay, how did we get to this situation? What are we going to do about it? So the conversation around it is getting more serious, and I do believe that solid policies will begin to follow. There was a time when a particular regime recommended 4 children per couple. 4 children. But it wasn't really put down as a law or as a firm policy. It was a recommendation. But I think that with the situation we are seeing, that conversation will come up. The pressure for lack of opportunities that leads young people to risk their lives and leave the country, so that the number of people who are productive in the productive age, who take care of those who are not yet able to take care of themselves, is actually not very large proportion. So I think that pressure will eventually lead to more discussion that will strengthen strong policy stance. You know, there was a time when China faced such a situation, and they took a decision that every couple should have only 1 child, and began to encourage couples to not only reduce the number of children that, to limit their household to 1 child, but also began to put some sanctions for those who actually violated that recommendation.
Okay, Ulla, I don't know how to put it, but I'm just going to put the question straight. What is the best option for managing, population? Because obviously, if you talk about population management, what comes to mind is family planning. And in this part of the world, when you talk about family planning, I'm sure you must have heard the response from contributions from those respondents. It is still going to ever stoke controversy around religion, as Kingsley said, around culture and fundamental human rights. So, what are the options we are looking at? And do you think this is it not an ambitious strategy?
No, I don't think it is ambitious. I think we need to change the narrative. I think we need to be better at explaining why this is so important. I think we need to take it down to family level and say this also impacts family wealth and health. If you have to educate 10 children within 10 years, that's a major drain on your economy. But if you have to educate 10 children over 30 years, your disposable income is higher. I think we have to remember that you can still have 10 children if that is your aspiration. Women are of reproductive age for more than 30 years. So you can space these pregnancies in a way that also stretches the financial commitment you need to make as a family in order to make sure that everyone thrives. I think education is critical. What we know from from countries in this region and in sub-Saharan Africa is also that when people get better quality education, both men and women, they tend to choose to have smaller families. because they don't need children in the same way to carry them through their entire lifespan. You talk about whether it's a lost case, you say, in this region and this part of the world. If you look at Zimbabwe, Zimbabwe have a relatively high contraceptive prevalence rate. And that has been based on investment in education, which also was paralleled then by making family planning accessible for populations. So we know it can be done. And so I really think it is about changing that narrative and say, this is not about control, this is not about planning. It's about making sure that everyone understands the influence they have. And as you say, it is a human right. And just remember, the right to life is actually, it's very controversial. But the maternal mortality rate in a country like Nigeria is very high. It's one of the highest, and there's huge regional discrepancies within the country. Women in Nigeria die from preventable causes that could have been avoided. You say access to family planning can decrease maternal mortality with up to 25%. That's a lot of life saved, right?
Can you unbundle family planning for us so that we can all understand? You've talked about child spacing. What is family planning?
Family planning just means that you decide when you want to be pregnant next time. It doesn't mean you don't have any more children. It is very simple. You decide, as a family, when do you want to have your next pregnancy. You space it. The mother remains healthy. The child is more likely to be healthy. We know child mortality also drops. We know education level increases. Family planning is an enabler for economic and social growth. And I will also say, when we look at the Sustainable Development Goals, I'm sorry, they will not happen without universal access to family planning and population management. It's not going to be achievable. But it's about planning. When do you have your next children? And if you want to have more children. That's the simple version.
Okay, thank you very much, Ulam Mula. Dr. Ejike, you've been on this agenda for some years now, and as I indicated earlier in our conversation, you have been a guest on Good Morning Nigeria talking about this. My question is going to Dr. Ejike Orji. Dr. Ejike, how much progress, if any, are we making, say, over a given time frame? Are we tearing down barriers? Are we still just crawling, or we are running on the same spot? What is our story with regard to efficient population management?
Yes, well when I look at this sort of issue, I look at it on cross-cutting areas. First of all, has government shown leadership that this is a problem and the government wants to solve it? The second one I want to look at is the governance structures put in place to make sure that happens. And of course, we look at the service delivery imperatives. How do the women and men in Nigeria get the services when? And then, of course, we look at how do we monitor and evaluate what we have done, whether we are meeting our targets. So let's start from leadership. There's no doubt that the government has shown wonderful leadership. There was a population policy developed far back in 2004. It's about to be revised. Also, the government has put in place a blueprint, the family planning blueprint, which expired last year, and a new one has been developed. In fact, I'm so excited that I'm sitting here with the Honorable Minister of Health. He launched the new family planning blueprint October this year to expand services, because occasionally it is not just because somebody wishes to. Family planning happens to be one of the most individualized services in healthcare. You have to counsel a woman and a man and then show them different methods, and based on their body constitution and what they want, you cannot prescribe a method that they will use. So the providers that provide it, family planning is important. So government has done a task-shifting, task-sharing policy, which states are now doing just about, I think, 22 states so far have been able to do that. Government also has done a communication strategy and plan. Because one of the key things, remember the minister mentioning about getting information to people, government has actually done that. There's a communication plan, a strategy and a plan. And then there's something we call the green dot logo. So, and it's placed in everywhere in the country where the women, once you see that green dot, you know that family planning services are available. Government has also made family planning services free. In other words, in any public site in Nigeria, if any woman or a man walks in there, he or she can get family planning services without paying a dime. In 2011, my association successfully advocated to government, and they put $3 million on the table as commodities purchase money. Before then, all the commodities we get in this country are supplied by donors. But federal government puts 3 million. And in 2018, this administration added another 1 million, making it $4 million that we put on the table to make sure that we have family planning services. The minister here has actually directed that this last one should be released for family planning services in the country. So what I'm trying to say here is that there is tremendous policy direction from government. At the NIPS, I hear that the federal government, president has directed them to focus on public policy imperatives in terms of population growth and human capital development. So on leadership level, we have done very well. But on the governance structure level to make sure this happens, that's where we have a problem. The federal government is doing a lot, but I can tell you at the sub-national level, we need a lot of work to do. And that's why some of us are proposing that Mr. President should please call the governors and talk to them. Nothing much is happening really in the way we want at the sub-national level. That's where the issues are. And you know, health is on a concurrent list. You know, they cannot, federal government cannot prescribe to the states. They cannot prescribe to this. The states have to take responsibility.
Why the apparent lethargy at the subnational level?
Well, this is one thing I have been looking at and asking myself what is really going on, because like everybody has spoken here, if you manage your family, there's prosperity. So we keep asking, why are the states, even to put it on their budget line item is a problem? When they even do, I was working with state-led accountability mechanism in about 18 states. Last year, we did an analysis, and some states have actually increased their budgetary allocation to health for almost 15%. But when you look at the releases that go with these things, none of them was above 4.5%. So it's leadership at that level that we keep saying that they need to understand that this is a death or life situation for us in the country.
Dr. Aje, it could also be that leadership at that level is also sensitive to, you know, the beliefs and, you know, views of people, you know, at the subnational level. Because a lot of people's lives, especially in Nigeria, revolve around their cultural and religious beliefs. And some, you know, believe that their religion, you know, mandates them to have multiple wives, therefore multiple children. Others, especially from the area you and I come from, you know, they cling on to a lot, you know, patriarchal, you know, system a lot. So, which, you know, helps to fuel, you know, the number of children a woman, for instance, have. If you don't have a male gender, you know, you're encouraged to keep having more and more, you know, until you get a male child. So, how are you going to, you know, convince or have the buy-in of people at that subnational level? Because when you do, then you'll be able to, you know, work with the subnational governments.
Thank you for that, for saying that. But you see, I belong to the school of thought. If you say you want to lead, you must be a visionary. You must have knowledge. You must lead your people, even with their eyes closed. They will trust you, and you take them to El Dorado.
But you can't throw away the religious belief of people just like that.
What I want to say here is that if you believe that's the best way, unless you believe that something is good, you won't be able to plan for it. There's a lot of work that has actually been done with the Christian clerics and the Muslim clerics. Take, for instance, the association recognized that one of the major barriers of family planning in Nigeria is religious barrier, because both religions say, go ye and procreate. But the same religion, all of them, the two of them say, any person that cannot take care of his family is worse than an infidel. So this family planning that the religions are actually preaching. And that's why we have made sure that we are working with the interfaith group. For every conference that we have in our family planning conference, we'll have a pre-conference of the interfaith group. And they have actually developed a Christian perspective and a Muslim perspective for family planning, which the imams used to preach. Okay. The federal minister launched that document a few years ago. So a lot of work is being done. A recent research has actually shown that religion is not the major impediment to family planning. It's actually myths and misconceptions of side effects. As we speak to tell you both what the government is doing in terms of communication strategy and plan, and then what civil society organizations like us are doing. The unmet need of Nigerian women is 20%. 20% of Nigerian women say that I want family planning services. For now, they are not getting it. But the other thing is the male involvement, advocating to the men to be supportive of the women. Because by anatomy and physiology, it looks like the burden of family planning services on the woman. I know that there's some research going on in England, which of course they have discarded because of this tremendous side effects that came out of it. We had a hormonal type of family planning a product is trying to be developed for men. So for now, it's only barrier and abstinence. So the whole burden is also on the woman. So, and that's why we're also talking to the men to be supportive of their wives and then make sure that they get the services that they need. But also the important thing here in terms of our religion, like you said, pushing back. The children that would deliver the children of Nigeria that will make a population 400 or 450 million in 2050 are already born. Even all of us stop producing now, the children are already born. And this is why we are also saying that the adolescents, the young people, we must focus on them. We call them the very visible but hard to reach. If we do not give them the appropriate information, whether they are married or unmarried, to make sure that they don't get pregnant unless it is necessary, but then we are all in trouble. 2 years ago, I was in Malawi, and then during the country group, is 18 country states on focal points of Africa, 18 Anglophone countries. We had a meeting there. And when it came to group work, I went to the Malawian group. I said, I'm now a Malawian. Let me know what they are doing. I was shocked to learn that they were actually taking services to the secondary schools, where teenagers are counseled. When they find out that they are sexually active, they counsel and give them a method there and then. Well, one of my questions, was there a pushback? They said, certainly there was a big one. One little girl, 16-year-old, they went to their school. By the time she was counseled, they found out she was sexually active. So they gave her a method, an implant. And there was a bandage put around her arm because there was some slight bleeding. When she got home, the mother said, what's happened to your hand? Did you fall? She said, no. She said they forced her and gave her a family planning implant. So the woman had the phone number of the minister and called the federal minister of health there and said, so it has come to the point you will force our young girls to have family planning. So the next day, the minister called a meeting of the principal, the health department that is responsible for that outreach, and the girl and the mother. So when the girl the teacher looked at her straight into the face when they posed the question, did the teacher force you? She now said no, that she was actually talked to and then she decided to have it. That's why Malawi, their contraceptive prevalence rate is almost 50%. So we need to show leadership at that level. We need to have community engagement and public education in a way that people will understand. Nigerians are brilliant people. We're showing it all over the world. If we are properly explained to and show a good pathway, Nigerians will follow. And they're already doing that.
I'm sure, Dr. Ejike, thank you very much for the example you just cited about Malawi. But I'm sure you're also familiar with the kind of resistance you find from certain quarters that look, don't introduce sex education in high schools, because it is claimed that you will spoil the children by exposing them to such ideas. But as you said, we'll keep knocking at the door and then tearing down the barriers,
Exactly.
so that at the end of the day, the numbers will be more salutary and therefore manageable. I just wanted you to repeat something again. I think that's a pretty interesting point that you made, among several others, that by 2050, the projection is that we will be so many, but that those who will make that happen are already available.
They're already born.
Yeah, just repeat it for us, for the benefit of our viewers one more time,
So
so
what
that
I'm
we know the magnitude of what we're likely dealing with.
Exactly. What I'm saying is that the children we have born now, this youthful bulge that we have right now, who have not gotten married, who have not started having babies, even if we stop, all of us that are adults now, if we stop today to have children, the children we already born, they will drive our population to 400 to 450 million by 2050.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Ejike. Let's return one more time to Mr. Alfonso of the National Population Commission. You are head of the Population Management Department. What exactly does the NPC do with regard to population management?
Yeah, thank you very much. NPC, by presidential mandate, is to coordinate all population activities in Nigeria. And we do that sectorially. We have three organs that complete that circuit. We first have our population technical working group, who monitors the policy implementation and report back to the superior organ, that is population advisory group, PHG, and then finally to the Nigerian Population Management Council, which are the APES, where the president is the chairman. Now, the functional aspect of all this day-to-day running or quarterly running of this frame is the Population Technical Working Group, whose chairman is the Director General of the National Population Commission. We do this by meeting all the sectors that are involved in population activity in Nigeria to give us information.
All right, Mr. Alfonso, thanks a lot. We're going to have to take a short break now. When we return, we'll continue with the conversation.
The counsel of our fathers.
I believe we have fought one civil war too many in this country. So those who experience it will run away from it.
Nigerian youths, let's build our nation together.
My name is Nando Jamda Muhammad.
Hussein Musa. Rodina Joel Finji. Musa John.
I'm a carpenter. I've been doing this for more than 8 years now.
Ina sai da plantain na kai kimamin shekara uku.
I've been selling my tomatoes for about 10 years now, and I do it for a better Nigeria.
Ina wannan sana'ar lemu ne domin Najeriya ta ci gaba. Ina sa domin Najeriya ta kyau. And you can see how we're doing our small little work to make Nigeria great.
As you can see, I'm a technician and I'm doing it to help myself and to help my generation.
Ina zaune ne a plateau na business. Kuma ina yin wannan domin ci gaban ƙasar Najeriya.
For a better Nigeria. This message is from the National Orientation Agency. Dialogue, empathy, love and unity. These are vital components of nation building.
For all to be well, we appeal that we should refrain from volatile, provocative, inciting messages and language.
Let's build and not destroy.
The Red Devils will look to continue their greatest away form when they travel to London to face the Hammers this Saturday. Will they succeed, or will the Hammers win their third consecutive home game against the Red Devils? Find out when West Ham United host Manchester United on the Premier League Live from 6 p.m, showing on the NTA network. The Premier League Live is brought to you by Axis Bank, Baba Ijebu, Lipton Tea, and Close Up in association with Gold.com.
All right, quite an interesting discussion we're having here in the studio. So let's also get to the nitty-gritty of our conversation. And I'm starting off this session with Honorable Minister Dr. Osagie Henry. In 2012, Nigeria committed to the FP initiative, if I'm correct. Am I correct, Honorable Minister?
Well, yes,
absolutely.
Yes.
So what are the details of this commitment and where are we?
Well, I can't tell you exactly how far we've gone with it, but because those are it's a very technical situation. But I think, if I understand correctly, we are in the process of trying to renew and redo that commitment. I was doing a draft for it the other day, and to get us to where we are supposed to be. The situation we're in with contraceptive prevalence rate, the modern rate is 12% at the moment. The traditional altogether is 17%. Our aspiration is supposed to be 27% by 2020. So we have not really, 2020 is gone, we have not really been there, we have not done what we are supposed to do. So that's why we are recommitting, starting all over again, to try and rejig our situation. But as I said earlier, the awakening is there to stimulate thinking, to stimulate new ideas, and probably a new attitude to family planning, and learn so that people can take responsibility, know that they are responsible for their own children, rather than think that the state will provide for them, or God provides for everybody. But if you have children in the belief that where there will be free education, free health, free jobs, everything done, you have no responsibility, then that is not the way to go at this time. And couples are going to have to be made to understand that you are responsible for the number of children you put into this world, and you should be held responsible socially also for the children that you bring into this world.
I just wonder, Honorable Minister, again, we've had the privilege of your presence as a guest on Good Morning Nigeria, and sometimes some of the issues we discuss often will dredge up the gap in follow-up responses, or for the subnational entities to be in lockstep with the federal government. Dr. Ejike once again was highlighting those gaps. Yesterday we had guests, who were talking about disabilities and the huge gaps that you find also at the subnational level. Now, on the issue of population management, because sometimes when you say family planning, it's like you want to castrate everybody and so on and so forth. Is the National Council of Health taking this as a priority item? And there are many priority items. I mean, from primary health care, for instance, is a priority item, and so on and so forth. But population management, are we likely to see this as an item recurrent on your agenda at the National Council of Health, with a feedback mechanism on what states have done and doing are proposing to do?
Yes, it features because it is under the Department of Family Health, and so you do have population issues featuring. But I can see that there's going to be more emphasis on it. There's going to have received more mention than ever before, especially since we have performed so dismally in our expectations of getting only so 12%, modern contraceptive instead of 27%. So we have to redouble our efforts. But again, you have to balance that with the politics that goes on at subnational level, particularly the attitude to promise everything to people during election, during campaign. You promise to take care of all their children, to give everybody jobs. You promise you're going to give everybody education, everybody get free health. So, of course, the men families feel they don't have anything to do. Just government will take care of all the children you produce. Now, that's not the right way to go. That language has to change, and that it has to change, particularly at the subnational level, but also at national level. Everybody has to be responsible for their own actions, for their own families, and expect to be held responsible for your family. If you have children, you're supposed to pay for their education. And in other countries, if you don't pay, it is deducted from your salary by compulsorily. It is taken out of your salary. You don't go away scot-free. So, but here, you leave the burden to the wife or to the mother, and you get away with it. So, continue producing without really being responsible for except they are successful, then you come out. If the children are not successful, then the father can hide. But that situation really has to change, and the attitude has to change.
Okay, thank you. Ula, are there strategic approaches to upscale the awareness of women, to the benefits of child spacing, and how? Because I think they are, the burden falls on them. That's one leg of my question, if you may.
So in UNFPA, we work very closely with women organizations across the country, and also in very rural areas, because the biggest challenge is in the rural areas. It is the areas hardest to reach, and how do we get there? So we are working with women's organizations, but also with youth organizations. They're very important to have with them, and young women, so that they understand exactly what it is we are talking about. That's an empowerment part also in understanding what is your right as a citizen, and also, again, what is the role that they want to play. But alongside with that, on building capacity in communities, working with women's organizations, understanding what does the woman actually want, because it has to be their choice. We have to remember that all the time. Also engaging, we heard before talking about male involvement. It's very, very important that we remember to include the men in the conversations, not always in the same conversations, but in separate, where we also talk through what are the benefits from a family perspective, what are the benefits for the husband, for the boyfriend, what is the idea. And also then the last part of that conversation at community level is, of course, including religious and traditional leaders. And I will say, also echoing what we just heard about for the pre-conference for family planning, which is starting next week, there's been a lot of work done with the interfaith organizations. And we are increasingly seeing religious scholars interpreting the scriptures, and also saying the scriptures do actually give way for family planning, because we have to be able to look after our children. So there's a lot of moving parts in that strategy. But what we do see is that awakening that the Honourable Minister is talking about is happening also in communities. But it will be a journey, and it's not necessarily going to be an easy journey. I just want to raise one point about young women. And I think this is about the youth. We heard also how big a percentage of the Nigerian population is young. We heard the next generation is already born. Mm-hmm. So involving youth and young women is really important in this. And what we do know is that when you talk to young men and young women, very few of them aspire to be parents when they are 16. And there's a difference between married youth and unmarried youth. But both need to have an unbiased access to family planning so they can make their choices. And that, I think, is going to be the next big hurdle, is creating social acceptance of the fact that you have sexually active youth who are not necessarily married and who do not want to have children. And that is going to be a sensible conversation, but it's also going to be a difficult conversation.
Would you be pushing for legislation, given that our attempt, as Dr. Oji earlier stated in years back, wasn't largely successful? Would you also be pushing for legislation as in other parts of the country?
What do you mean legislation?
Legislation to legislate, family planning such that it becomes a law?
But I think the policies are in place by and large in Nigeria. I think we have a very good policy framework. I don't think we should, by law, determine any number of children. I don't think that's a wrong way to go down from. I think very wrong. And I think we agree on that. You can give advice and recommendations, but we cannot impose control. I think that would be a mistake. But I think, as we heard, family planning access is free in this country. If any woman or young girl goes into a facility and wants family planning, she will be counseled. So I think the legal framework is, by and large, where it should be. I think it's about behavior change communication. It's about engaging communities. And it's also building capacity of healthcare providers, having the difficult conversations around provider bias. Because in rural areas, a young woman can go into a health facility, and then it's her mother's friend who is the nurse, and she will tell her, you should not be doing this, you're not yet married, yes, and then she walks away.
Right? The larger criticisms against family planning has been centered on contraceptives, yes, and the effect on the body, and of course what the holy books prescribe. Can you speak to us about that?
About side effects?
Contraceptives and the benefits, yes, the harmful effects on the body.
Yeah.
Because that has been the issue raised by critiques of family planning.
Yes, but the interesting part is that it's never been documented, really. And I think that's what we need to remember. When you look at side effects across all kinds of medicines that people take, the one who have the least risk is actually family planning. It's in the very low risk area. The side effects are minimal, but I think we need the doctors to talk a little bit more to that. I'm not a medical doctor. I just want to be very clear on that, right? But I just want to say we know that of all the things that people people do take a lot of self-induced drugs, and they go to the pharmacy and there's a lot more side effects on that than a well-administered method of family planning. That's very clear.
All right, thank you very much, Ula Mula. Dr. Ejike Oji, in terms of the strategic communication component of population management, and more specifically family planning, are we missing out on targeting appropriate messages and seeking to focus more on men rather than the emphasis being on women? Biologically, as we know, a woman can't get pregnant for more than once in 9 months. But a man, of course, has the capacity of inseminating thousands, several more. And from what we have seen and what we hear in our environment, it appears that a great deal of responsibility is being placed on the woman rather than also on the man. And we see the socio-economic consequences. When the children come and the school fees time comes, you are the man that will pay the school fees. You are the man that will build the house. If you are living in a face me, I face you, once the population in that face me, I face you explodes, you are the one that will go and look for alternative accommodation. Why is it that we are not focusing our communication on men? Because when you hear some persons, it's as if for a man to get into family planning, is you are denying him of his manhood.
Yeah, thank you, Kingsley. I think this is a big conversation that is going on. But for some of us that have practical knowledge of the environment, being in programming for so many years, anytime we bring up this conversation, I look at using the Pareto's rule, where do I put 80% of my resources for the outcome I'm expecting? And I have cliches or stories from the field that show that if I have 100 naira, I'd rather put 80 naira on the women rather than put it on the men. The simple reason is, if you look at the biology or the anatomy and physiology of surrounding pregnancy, the woman carries almost all the burden, so to speak. So at the end of the day, when a woman is pregnant, the man stays away for 9 months, so to speak. When the woman delivers, it's the woman that is in the delivery room. She takes all the burden. Like you said, when the baby pops up some men, they are not fathers anymore, they disappear. So if I'm going to make an investment, I would rather concentrate my investment on the woman. I'm not saying we should not talk to the men. I'm talking about in terms of resources allocation. But how am I going to allocate the resources? It's been shown convincingly by research. If you do targeted girl-child education, the outcome from a secondary school leaver is way, way more than the outcome from a girl that didn't go to school at all. The outcome from a girl that goes to the university is also much, much easier because the women now make decisions for themselves. So the first investment I would like to make is to give the women the information, the skills and ability to make decisions for themselves. Now, a woman that is well educated brings income on the income table. So she can now tell her husband, if you want me to continue to go to work to subsidize what you bring to make sure that our family goes to prosperity, she has a better negotiation voice on the table with her husband. So that's number one investment. Then the second one is that talking about family planning services, really, if the woman has to make this decision, the man now doesn't want her to stop having pregnancy, if she can take that by her own volition. And I'll give you specific examples from the field. Two stories. One, a woman had gone to a family planning, a community sensitization program on reproductive health issues. 7 years before this incident I'm trying to say happened, that was where she learned that it is dangerous for her to have more than 4 children. The 5th pregnancy might be more dangerous than the other 4 pregnancies put together. So she said, so I'm risking my life. She already had 7 children. And her husband wanted more. So in that outreach, she learned that she can get family planning services and then do it in a way that her husband would know. So she went to the clinic and decided to take an intrauterine contraceptive device as a method. But we had also trained providers that when the thread, make sure it doesn't come out because the man will feel it and say, what's going on there? But unfortunately for her, for 7 years, nothing was happening. The man was saying, what's going on? He said, well, God brings, when God brings the baby, we'll have the baby. But unfortunately for her, the IUCD shifted. So the man was feeling the threat. I said, what did you do inside there? The woman had to confess. So he took her to the hospital. To tell you how men are, he took her to the hospital, went to the doctor and said, remove that thing you put inside there. And stayed inside the consulting room and looked until the doctor removed the IUCD. So, but you know what the woman did? Because the woman knows it's her life. The woman surreptitiously forgot her bag in the consulting room. The man had already gone and sat in his car. And then the woman ran out to say, it was the one that said, where's your bag? He said, oh, my good husband, I forgot my bag. She ran back into the consulting room and told that doctor, there's that one they call injection. Give me that injection. So the doctor gave her hormonal injection for contraception. So she carried her bag. And then the man, feeling that he's King Kong. But the woman was able to do that because she was informed. I'm not saying we should not talk to the men. We will continue to talk to them. But I feel, let us increase girl-child education. It's all evidence in our country.
Dr. Ejike, your point is noted. I'm sorry to interject, because I recall once when we were discussing this same topic here on Good Morning Nigeria, there's a senator from one of the states, a female senator, who said that, yes, in spite of the empowerment that comes with education for the woman, that in some families, you as a woman, no matter your level of education and your economic status, you will still require the permission of your husband before you undertake or undergo contraception. And if you neglected him, then a family meeting will be summoned.
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying, that occasionally it's not all laws that are obeyed, if you ask me. If the woman is empowered, the woman will do the right thing. But we are also saying that we should be talking to the men. No doubts about that. In fact, there was a big policy dialogue about 2 years ago here, anchored by This Day of Nigeria, where we focused on male involvement. Let's talk to the men. And then the only way and only thing men listen to, because I remember I made that pitch, if you show a man clearly the prosperity that will go with his letting his wife space the children properly and limit the size of the family. If that narrative can be connected to the men, it resonates with men. It resonates with men. You know, I keep saying that occasionally we overplay this thing of religion and culture. Like I said, a research done by Gates Foundation 2 years ago showed that religion is no more the major barrier. The major barrier is those myths and misconceptions. You posed that question to Ola, the side effects and all that. Side effects are very minimal. But the myths and misconceptions around it pose a lot of danger in terms of...
So you bust the myths, right?
Exactly.
Okay. All right.
I'd just like for us to also look at the values, you know, upholding some of our cherished values. Now, if we're taking this issue to the adolescents or to the, you know, students in the schools, are we not also breaking down some of those cherished values of abstinence, you know, don't do this before, you know, get into the, you know, matrimonial home and things like that? Because you now give students the license, the liberty. Oh, if I know I have, I know this implant, this prevention, I can do whatever I like to do. Dr. GK, yes.
That is the narrative we hear every day. You know why? The reason is that we are, should I say, doing the ostrich hiding. The first show in 2006 or 7, Packard Foundation did a study to find out who is actually dying when it comes to maternal mortality. 70% of all maternal deaths as at that time were children below the age of 18. Most of them are not married, but they are having sex and getting pregnant and dying on the pathway of unsafe abortion complications. Then another research has shown globally that in countries where there is comprehensive sexuality education, you give age-appropriate information, that unintended pregnancy is actually reduced. Do you get my point? Unintended pregnancies, unwanted pregnancies, actually reduced compared to countries where we are saying, don't tell the children anything, don't tell the children anything. I have 2 girls. From the time they were small, I started educating them about sex.
And in any event, I mean, it's the countries to which some Nigerians are seeking to emigrate to, they do family planning in those countries. They see the level of prosperity in those countries arising from the fact that they are able to manage their populations much better. So, this is but I think that...
Ella wants to respond to the
you
issue.
want to respond?
Yes.
I just want to add to this issue about values, right? So a value is also caring for each other. And a value is also respecting human lives and each other when you're boyfriend-girlfriend. And I think we have to learn. My generation, I'm a grandmother, okay? I do not like to think about my grandson who is turning 17 next time. I don't want to think of him as sexually active. That's an emotion inside of me. But reality is that teenagers are sexually active. And I think it's about a value of responsibility for the choices you make. And I think when you look at the teenage rate of pregnancy in Nigeria, that is a very clear indication that Nigerian teenagers are sexually active. And that takes us to the numbers we just heard from my colleague. That leads to women dying, young girls dying, their entire future lost because of unsafe abortions that kills them. Or they are dropping out of school and they end up being single mothers in a very young age. All those other consequences are just dire for a country like Nigeria because you lose out of that potential that young girl could bring to society. So let's not live in ignorance or in denial or pretend we are ostriches. I think that's a very good analogy. Let's own the fact that teenagers are sexually active whether we like it or not, and we can teach them to be that in a responsible way whereby they don't ruin their futures and look after each other.
I will preface this question, with the greatest caution. But since we're having this context of our discourse around myths, prejudices, and perceptions, in otherwise enlightened quarters, I'm sure you must have heard this argument, Dr. Ike in particular, having been dealing with this issue for many years. And I would like Mullah to respond to this. The view has been expressed, sometimes shockingly, that population management is a device by the Caucasian race to hold down the population of the black race, because they feel that the Caucasian race might, in future, in terms of actuarial projections, thin out, and then the black race would overwhelm and populate the entire world. And so suspicion arises when this is being funded, when you have all kinds of comments and commitments coming from the Caucasian race. But as I said, you hear this argument sometimes in otherwise enlightened quarters.
And as you can imagine, I hear that particularly often. But I also think conspiracy theories, there's lots of them. And I just want to say, if that was a true theory, then the Caucasian race have lost that game. In my country, we have a declining fertility rate. I mean, forget it, it's not about that. It's about healthy lives. It's about ensuring both the mother and the father survives. It's about ensuring that children are born because they're welcomed into this world, not because there was no way the mom couldn't avoid that next pregnancy. She might want to wait. The trick about unmet need is not that the woman doesn't want to have more children. She would just like her body to rest a year. So that's when you get unwanted children, is when a woman has to have that extra child at a time where her body may not be able to give the best health condition to her and to her child.
Okay, we have just a minute. Let's quickly take our tweets that have come in. Mike Ayanko, are we overpopulated? The answer is no. We cluster in urban areas for many obvious reasons. Go to remote villages, you'll see nobody. Let's start development and industrializations of hinterlands to drift people there. Some people run away from villages because of perceived...
Well, so how does Mike then explain the fact that you have no fewer than 70% of the population involved in agriculture in the rural areas? So where are those persons coming from? Now, Ajani Olaoluwa, I want to take this now, says, what you don't measure, you can't manage. Our failure to consistently conduct a census exercise is a major reason it's difficult to manage our population effectively. So we have to fix that first.
Okay, so Kingsley, we are told that we can't take...
Well, yeah, I just there's something here. It's all about on the economics. Festus Akimboyewa says there's need to control Nigeria's bloated population. It would be a miracle for a country of 200 million people earning less than $30 billion annually to achieve much.
Honourable Minister, just in 60 seconds. So this recommitment to FP 2020, how seriously are we taking it? Where do we go from here?
It has to be, I was listening to all the conversation just now, it has to be a multi-pronged approach. And it is true that a lot of focus appears to be on the women, and also for obvious reasons, because they are the ones carrying the pregnancy, they are the ones at risk. But I take the comment of Ms. Miller just now very, very seriously, that children should be welcomed into this world. You don't want a lot of children who came unwelcomed, who came because we're not really wanted, because it creates complications. Secondly, I believe that men should be held responsible also for the children they bring into this world. So if you have a child and you can abdicate responsibility, then of course what stops you from going around and doing that everywhere? So and having more children than you can actually manage. Then of course there's a religious aspect which we hear is declining, but it is there in the subsurface. And then there's a political aspect of looking for votes by promising everything free, when really nothing is free. So I think that if we take a multi-pronged approach, we'll get better results.
Honourable Minister, thanks a lot. We earlier introduced Dr. Ejike Orji as chair of the local organizing committee for the Family Planning Conference in Abuja. Tell us, what's the theme, what to expect, and what potential outcomes there might be, very quickly.
Yes, thank you very much. We're having our sixth National Family Planning Conference. And you know, every 2 years we do that in collaboration with the Federal Ministry of Health. And our master here is the Minister of Health sitting here. We're very delighted to have his support. The theme for this year is FP 2020 agenda, a post-FP 2020 agenda on the safeguarding investments in emergencies. Excuse me. And we also had about 7 sub-themes, but those on a broad view are focusing on how do we reposition family planning financing, how do we look at making sure that during the pandemic that is still ongoing that women have services that they require. And then also there has been a lot of talk around adolescents. We call them divisible but hard to reach. How do we reposition our narratives to make sure that those young people get the service that they need? And then finally, we're also looking at the gender-based violence that came out because of the pandemic lockdown, how Nigeria has been on the map, even though it's a global phenomenon, but in Nigeria it became something that all of us are unhappy about.
All right.
So we have three brief conferences, youths, women, and interfaith, and finally the major conferences on the 9th, 10th, and 11th. And Honorable Minister is our chief host.
All right, Dr. Ejike Oji, Chairman, Association of for the Advancement of Family Planning, and of course, Chair, Local Organizing Committee of the conference. Thank you very much for joining us on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much.
Let me also appreciate Ula Elizabeth Muller, Nigeria, Resident Representative, United Nations Population Fund, UNFPA. Thank you very much for joining us. We also had Irene Zechi Ndoka Alphonsus, Acting Director and Head Population Management Department, NPC, who joined us via Zoom from Akwanga in Nasarawa State. Thank you. Honorable Minister of Health, Dr. Sagi Hanire, always a pleasure to have you with us here in the studio.
Thank you.
All right, that's it on Good Morning Nigeria for today. On behalf of the production crew, I am Claire Dilabo Abdul Razak. Have a wonderful weekend.
Program returns on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, enjoy your weekend, stay safe and be well. I'm Kingsley Osadolo.